In the quiet neighborhood of Pinebrook Hollow, everything seemed ordinary. The houses, all with matching brick facades, were neatly arranged, their gardens kept in pristine condition. The sun had just risen, casting a gentle light over the sleepy suburb. Inside one of the homes, Leah Brown took a long sip from her coffee mug, the warmth of the drink grounding her as she stepped out onto the porch, cleaning cloth in hand. The windows weren't exactly dirty, but there were some faint smudges that she couldn't ignore, caught perfectly in the morning sun. Her husband, Jason, was outside as well, bent over a new mailbox he was trying to install. The old one had been dented for weeks, and Jason had complained about it frequently. Today, he had finally gotten around to replacing it with a sleek, new model. It was a small, unimportant task, one that seemed to go unnoticed by the world around them. But here in Pinebrook Hollow, everything had to be perfect, yards mowed to exact specifications, every lawn ornament in place, and no one dared to break the unwritten rules that govern the neighborhood. As Leah scrubbed at the window, a faint smile touched her lips. She glanced over at Jason, who was wrestling with the stubborn post. That's when she heard it, a scream. It wasn't a yell of frustration, but one of genuine fear, raw and unsettling. Her cleaning cloth froze in her hands as her pulse quickened. Dropping the bottle of cleaner, she rushed through the house, her sneakers pounding on the floor as she threw open the door with a force that nearly knocked it off its hinges. Jason was no longer by the mailbox. Instead, he was pressed up against their wrought iron fence, 3 men surrounding him. One of them had a knee pressed into his back, while another twisted his arms behind him, forcing them into an unnatural position. The third man stood off to the side, his arms crossed, watching impassively. They weren't police officers or even security guards. No, these men wore matching navy polo shirts with a logo that read Neighborhood Safety Team. They were just ordinary men playing dress-up in uniforms, acting like they had the authority to enforce something more than just rules. "What's going on?" Leah demanded, her voice trembling with shock. The men didn't respond to her. Jason, his face pressed into the metal of the gate, let out a pained groan. One of the men barked an explanation, but the words didn't make sense. Violation of neighborhood guidelines. Unauthorized modification of property. Leah felt a cold anger surge through her. They were detaining her husband over a mailbox? This was absurd. She stepped forward, her hands shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. "You don't have the right to do this. Let him go." The man in charge didn't even look at her. Instead, he barked orders, his radio crackling with static. Jason didn't struggle. He could barely move, his breath shallow. Leah's heart hammered at her chest. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was clear that these men believed they had the right to do whatever they wanted, and they were going to keep doing it unless someone stood up to them. The doorbell camera caught the entire exchange. Jason's restraint, Leah's frantic cries, the men's cold indifference. The neighbors? They watched from behind their curtains, some even closing their blinds as the situation unfolded. Leah could feel their gaze, but no one came to help. "You're not cops," Leah said, her voice steady now. "You don't get to treat him like this." The leader smirked and raised his clipboard as if her words were an annoyance. He didn't flinch. The other men seemed unbothered, and Jason was too weak to defend himself. Leah stood there, heart pounding, but no one moved. The moment dragged on. When the police finally showed up, the scene had shifted. The officers were lounging under a tree, sipping from a bottle of water, chatting as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Jason was sitting on the porch, nursing his injuries, his shirt torn, his eyes vacant. Leah stood beside him, her arms crossed, as the officers treated the situation like a minor inconvenience. "They're volunteers for the neighborhood safety team," one of the officers explained, almost apologetically. "This might be a civil issue." Leah's jaw clenched. "Civil?" They cracked his rib over a mailbox. The officer shrugged. "File a report. Talk to the HOA." The cold indifference of the officers only fueled the fire inside her. This wasn't about justice anymore. It was about ensuring that no one ever touched her husband again. Days passed, and Jason barely left the couch, his ribs aching with every breath. Leah stopped answering calls and didn't leave the house. The footage of the incident had spread through the neighborhood chat, then across social media. Neighbors avoided eye contact, and the silence from the people around her became deafening. Leah rewatched the footage over and over. Jason's face against the gate, the smug expression of the man in charge. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. Then, one morning, there was a knock. Not a casual one, a deliberate heavy knock. Leah opened the door, and there they were. Two of the men, dressed in their same polo shirts, one holding a clipboard. They were here for another violation, but this time, Leah was ready. Without a word, she slammed the door in their faces, her heart pounding, but her resolve firm. They had no idea who they were messing with. They didn't knock again, but Leah knew they'd be back. A few days later, as the men wandered around her yard, filming, measuring, and taking notes, Leah didn't hesitate. She grabbed her gun, checked it, and stepped out onto the porch. Barefoot, the gun held low but firm in her hand, she pointed it toward the sky and said in a voice that was steady, unyielding, "Get off my property." The men froze, one of them dropping his clipboard. The leader, smirking at first, froze completely when Leah fired a shot into the air. The birds scattered, and the men stumbled back, clearly shaken. Without another word, the leader turned and ran, the others following him in haste. Leah lowered the gun but kept it in her hands, her voice barely a whisper. "Touch my husband again," she said, "and I swear to God." They didn't dare return. By evening, the footage had gone viral. A neighbor had captured the moment and posted it online with a simple caption, "You won't believe this." It spread like wildfire, and soon enough, it was all over the news. People shared their own stories of mistreatment by neighborhood associations, and the HOA board scrambled to dissolve the safety team in a panic. Two of the men faced charges for impersonating law enforcement. Jason, still healing, began to feel a little lighter, the weight of the violation slowly lifting. Leah slept soundly for the first time in days, not because things were perfect, but because she had found her strength. The Glock stayed in the safe, but it was there if she ever needed it. Neighbors began to speak to her differently. Some whispered apologies, others gave her knowing nods. Leah didn't care for their words. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't a victim. She was a woman who had said enough and had made sure no one would forget it. The mailbox remained in place, a quiet symbol of her resolve, while Jason sat on the porch, reading, his steps lighter than before. The world wasn't perfect, but Leah had carved her place in it. If anyone came knocking again, she was ready, and they wouldn't dare test her a second time. As the days passed, life in Pinebrook Hollow slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but everything had shifted. The once peaceful suburb had been shaken by the events that unfolded on Leah Brown's porch. What had started as a simple confrontation over a mailbox had turned into a defining moment for both Leah and the community. She had stood up not just for her husband, but for herself and for the quiet rebellion against a system that had become too comfortable in its power. In the days after the incident, the whispers in the neighborhood grew louder. Some neighbors who had avoided her gaze before now nodded in acknowledgement. It was as if Leah had unlocked something within them, a quiet courage they didn't know they had. They had watched her, the woman who once seemed like just another suburban wife, and now they saw her as someone unafraid to push back when the rules didn't make sense. She had shown them what it looked like to not be afraid to stand firm, even when the consequences seemed too high. But Leah wasn't interested in accolades. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't looking for praise or sympathy. She was simply someone who had reached her breaking point and had done what was necessary. She had acted out of necessity, not ego, out of the instinct to protect the people she loved and the home they had worked hard to build. For her, it wasn't about becoming a symbol of defiance. It was about setting things right in a world where authority too often overstepped its boundaries. By the time the footage spread, Leah had moved on. The saga of the fake HOA enforcers went viral, sparking debates about power misuse. People rallied behind Leah, and the story spread beyond Pinebrook Hollow, symbolizing the fight for autonomy. Jason, still healing, found peace in the justice that followed. The pain in his ribs faded as he realized they were no longer powerless. Leah, too, had changed. She discovered an inner strength and confidence. If anyone came knocking again, they'd face a woman who would never back down.